They gave Selka Morn a burial shovel before the red salamanders had finished dying. That was how the lower Ember Baths judged her. Not with trial. Not with witness. With ash buckets, a black spade, and 17 small bodies cooling in a copper trough beneath the Dragon Palace. Bury them before the court descends, Ember Surgeon Keld said. His voice held no cruelty that anyone important would notice. That was his gift. He could make a death order sound like housekeeping. Selka stood barefoot on the warm stone, sleeves rolled past her elbows, gray bath steam clinging to her hair and soot darkening the curve of her cheek. Around her, the lower Ember Baths breathed red mist from cracked vents in the floor. Iron pipes carried runoff heat from the royal dragon chambers above. Healing basins steamed along the walls, each one meant for noble dragons, wounded fire-bearers, and high-blooded patients who would never look down long enough to see who cleaned the heat after they left. The salamanders lived here because no one else wanted them. Small, red-backed creatures no longer than a woman's palm, with ember gills, black bead eyes, and feet delicate enough to leave star-shaped marks in warm ash. They crawled through old vents and drank dying sparks from the baths. The court called them ritual waste. Surgeons called them fuel residue. Servants called them pests. Selka called them by name. She knew which one slept curled under the cracked west basin. Which one liked to climb the copper ladle? Which one had a missing toe from a careless apprentice's boot? Which one glowed brighter when Vaelor Rune passed above the baths and his dragonfire trembled through the ceiling stones? Tonight, most of them lay still, not all dead. Not yet. That was the part no one cared to distinguish. Dravik held a folded surgeon's report in one gloved hand. The dragonfire rite failed because lower bath maintenance allowed contaminated ember creatures into the flame channel. If the creatures were blamed, no one would ask why the king's flame had entered them before the rite failed. If Selka buried them quickly enough, the report would become truth before the bodies cooled. Selka looked at the trough. A tiny salamander twitched once beneath a layer of ash. Contaminated, she said. Dravik's eyes cooled. Do not sentimentalize ritual failure. They were alive before the rite. They were interfering with it. They were hiding from heat they could not survive. The nearest junior attendants looked away. They had seen Selka cup salamanders in her palms during vent purges. They had watched her move them from scalding channels before royal treatments. They had laughed sometimes, gently, because Selka carried unwanted things like they mattered. Tonight, no one laughed. Tonight, the upper court had heard that Dragon King Vaelor's renewal rite failed. The king's flame had broken in the high chamber. The palace lamps had gone dim, and Dravik's report had reached the throne before Selka's hands had stopped shaking. The report named her negligence. The court believed him. Vaelor believed him. That was the part Selka kept pressing her tongue against, like a cut in the mouth. The Dragon King had stood in the upper arch an hour ago, tall and pale with fevered fire beneath his skin, black hair damp from ritual steam, gold eyes darker than usual. He had looked at Selka as Dravik spoke of contamination, improper creature handling, lower bath disorder. He had not shouted, he had not threatened. He had simply said, "Do what the surgeon orders." He had seen the salamanders glow beneath the bath vents before. Once, when his flame trembled after a council rite, 3 of them had brightened under the stones like small living embers. He had let Dravik call it residue. A king liked explanations that did not ask him to kneel beside unwanted things. That was worse. Anger might have left a mark she could argue with. His trust in Dravik left only a door closing. Dravik gestured toward the ash trough. They are spent. Selka's hand tightened around the shovel. Some are still breathing. Then be efficient. The word entered her like cold iron. Efficient. A small thing dying slowly was inconvenient to people waiting for clean floors. Selka moved to the trough. The salamanders lay in a heap of fading red backs, their glow dim and uneven. One blinked up at her, little Marrow, the one with the missing toe. Its ember gills fluttered weakly. Selka set the shovel down. Dravik's mouth tightened. "Pick it up." "No." The attendants froze. Dravik turned fully toward her. "Excuse me?" Selka reached into the trough and lifted Marrow with both hands. The salamander was light, too light, its body no warmer than a dying coal. Ash stuck to its eyes. "You ordered me to bury the dead," she said. "This one is not dead." A distinction without royal value. Selka looked up. Her voice stayed quiet. That was the only weapon she had in a room trained to call softness disorder. It has value to itself. Dravik stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, faint and surgical. "That is precisely why you are unfit for lower bath charge. You confuse care with authority." Above them, a heavy door opened. The temperature changed. Every flame in the lower ember baths bent toward the stair. Dragon King Vaelor Run descended through the red mist. He wore no crown now, only dark ritual robes half-fastened at the throat. His chest marked with fading ember sigils that should have been burning bright after the renewal rite. His face was controlled, but exhaustion lived under the sharpness. The power around him felt wounded. Not weak. Worse than weak. Unsteady. Every attendant lowered their head. Selka did not. She held the dying salamander against her palms. Vaelor's gaze fell to it, then to hair. Dravik says the creatures caused the rupture. Selka's throat tightened. Dravik is wrong. The surgeon's voice cut in at once. "Majesty, her attachment to the salamanders is documented. She has hidden them from purge orders before." Vaelor looked at Selka. "Is that true?" "Yes." A murmur moved through the baths. She did not soften the answer. "I hid them from purge fires because purge fires were killing them." Dravik stepped closer. "And tonight her interference cost you part of your flame." Vaelor's eyes darkened. Selka felt that accusation more than she wanted to. Not because it was true, because it came from a king who looked as if something inside him had been cut and could not find the wound. He looked at Marrow in her hands. "Bury them." The words landed softly. They still crushed. Selka looked down at the salamander. Its tiny ember gills moved once, then stopped. For a breath, something inside Selka went still with it. She lowered Marrow into the ash trough, picked up the shovel. The attendants watched. Dravik watched. Vaelor watched. Selka knelt beside the burial pit, cut into the warm stone floor, where failed ritual remnants were scraped into ash and sealed beneath iron grates. She tipped the trough carefully, not dumping them, not letting their small bodies fall like waste. One by one, she laid the salamanders in the ash. Marrow last. Her hands shook only when no one was looking at her face. Then the ash moved. Selka froze. A red glow pulsed beneath her fingers. Not from the pit, from the salamanders. One small body twitched, then another. Then all 17 opened their black bead eyes at once. The attendants cried out and stumbled back. Dravik went white. The salamanders rose from the ash and crawled towards Selka. Slow, trembling, impossible. Their red backs brightened, each one carrying a thin thread of gold flame beneath the skin. Vaelor took one step forward. His breath caught. The gold in the salamanders was not bath fire. It was royal, his. The salamanders formed a living ember circle around Selka's knees. They did not crown her. They returned what they had been forced to carry to the only hands that had never treated them as waste. Marrow climbed into her lap, opened its tiny mouth, and breathed a fragment of Dragon King Vaelor's missing flame into her hands. The flame in Selka's hands did not return to Vaelor when he reached for it. That was the first impossible thing after the burial pit opened. The second was the way every red salamander turned toward him at once. Not bowing, not worshipping, watching. The lower ember baths held its breath beneath the dragon palace, red mist hanging low around the warm stone floor, ash still clinging to the edges of the burial pit. 17 salamanders formed a living ember circle around Selka's knees. Their backs glowed, with thin gold lines beneath the red, each thread trembling as if the flame inside them remembered pain. Marrow sat in Selka's lap, tiny claws curled into her soot-stained skirt. Its mouth had just breathed a fragment of royal fire into her palms, and that fragment now hovered above her skin like a small gold coal, too wounded to fly home. Vaelor Rune stopped, with his hand extended. For one moment, no one in the baths moved. Not the attendants, not the junior surgeons, not Dravik Keld, whose face had gone pale and then quickly careful. Vaelor looked at the flame over Selka's hands. His voice came low. "Why is my flame inside them?" No apology, no softness. Only the first question he should have asked before ordering burial. Selka did not lift her eyes to him at once. She looked at Marrow first, at the weak flutter of ember gills along its throat, at the tiny creature still alive because death had been delayed long enough to become testimony. "They did not steal it," she said. Dravik stepped forward. "Residual royal flame contamination." The phrase sounded ready-made. Too ready. "It is common after a failed rite," he continued. "Fragments cling to lower bath creatures, vents, drains, ash surfaces. The caretaker's emotional interference has made the residue appear responsive." Selka's hand closed slightly around the hovering flame. The gold coal shivered, but it still did not leave her. Heat opened a thin red line across Selka's palm. She did not close her fist. A wounded flame could still burn the hand that refused to abandon it. Vaelor noticed. So did Dravik. The surgeon's eyes sharpened. Selka said, if it were residue, it would fade when called. Dravik's smile was thin. "A bath girl speaks now as an ember physician?" "No," Selka said. "As the person who cleans what your reports name after you leave." A faint sound moved through the attendants. Not quite approval. Recognition. Quickly swallowed. Vaelor lowered his hand, but his gaze remained fixed on the flame. His chest sigils flickered weakly beneath his ritual robe, trying to answer the fragment and failing. Selka saw the failure. She did not let pity soften her mouth. He had seen the salamanders glow before. He had let Dravik call it residue. Now residue was refusing its king. Vaelor looked at the ember circle. "Explain." Selka stroked one finger carefully behind Marrow's head. The tiny salamander leaned into the touch, as if pain had not taught it better. "Red salamanders absorb dying sparks," she said. "That is how they survive in the lower baths. They crawl through old vents after treatments and drink what royal fire leaves behind." Dravik cut in. "Contaminated behavior." Selka did not look at him. "Not contamination. Cleanup." The word struck the room harder than she expected. Cleanup was invisible work. Safe work, until someone decided the thing cleaning danger had become the danger. She lifted her palm, letting the small gold coal brighten enough for the nearest attendants to see. "They take in sparks that are already dying. Old heat, broken embers, wounded flame that would otherwise rot inside the pipes." Her voice steadied. "They do not steal living fire." Vaelor's eyes darkened. "Then why is mine in them?" Selka looked at him then. "Because part of your flame was already dying before the rite failed." The baths went silent. Dravik's voice cracked like a small blade. That is a dangerous accusation. It is an answer. It is speculation from a woman who hid ritual creatures from purge orders. Selka finally turned toward him. I hid them from purge fires, not from you. Dravik's expression did not change, but something tightened behind his eyes. Vaelor saw it, not enough, but he saw it. The salamanders shifted around Selka's knees. One by one, their ember backs pulsed faintly. Gold lines appeared beneath the red, not bright enough to restore a king, not strong enough to explain everything, but too clear to dismiss as ordinary bath residue. A junior attendant whispered, "There are too many fragments." Dravik turned sharply. "Silence." The attendant dropped his head. Vaelor did not. "How long?" the king asked. Selka's fingers stilled on Merrow's back. "How long have they carried it?" he asked. She did not want to answer, not because she was guilty, because the answer would prove how long no one important had been looking. "Weeks," she said. The word fell softly. It still changed the room. Vaelor's face went still. Selka continued before Dravik could reshape it. After the Moon Council rite, 3 salamanders glowed gold under the west vents. After the border oath treatment, 5. After your fever bath, Merrow shook for 2 days with flame caught in his gills. Vaelor's eyes flicked toward Merrow. The salamander blinked at him. A king and a creature no longer than his palm looked at one another across a burial pit. Dravik spoke quickly. "And she concealed this." Selka's head lifted. There it was. The hook turned back toward her throat. "She hid the creatures," Dravik said, voice gaining force. "Therefore she hid the king's flame. Majesty, this proves the report. Her attachment obstructed proper extraction." "Extraction?" Selka said. Dravik went still. Only a breath. But Selka heard the word he had not meant to sharpen. Vaelor heard it too. His gaze moved slowly to Dravik. "What extraction?" Dravik bowed his head. "A clinical term. If contamination is present, royal flame must be extracted before it destabilizes." One of the salamanders hissed. A tiny sound, barely more than steam through teeth. Then another salamander opened its mouth and breathed out a thin gold thread. The thread did not go to Vaelor. It curled downward and seared itself across the ash beside the burial pit. Letters formed in molten gold. Not many. The salamanders had little strength. Flame stored before Surgeon's report. Vaelor looked at the molten words, then at Dravik's folded report. For the first time, the report looked less like evidence than preparation, and he had believed it. Dravik recovered before shame could become law. "Stored before the report," he said, "means she concealed royal flame before the rite. Majesty, this does not clear her. It condemns her." The molten words still burned in the ash beside the burial pit. Flames stored before Surgeon's report. Selka Morn kept both hands cupped around the small gold coal above her palms. The flame had not returned to Vaelor. It had not left her either. Its heat opened the thin red line across her skin wider, but she did not close her fist. Merrow trembled in her lap, ember gills fluttering weakly. Around her knees, the other red salamanders dimmed after giving their testimony, their bodies small against the ash, their gold threads flickering like candlelight in rain. Vaelor Rune looked at the words, then at Dravik. His face remained controlled, but the power around him had shifted. Not healed, not softened, sharpened. "What extraction?" he asked. The same question from moments ago, now stripped of surprise and given weight. Dravik bowed his head with perfect care. "A standard Ember surgical procedure, Majesty. If royal flame enters an unstable vessel, it must be extracted before it spreads corruption. From salamanders? From anything that carries contamination." Selka looked down at Marrow. Anything. That was how Dravik made living bodies easier to cut open. They were not unstable vessels, she said. They were dying trying to hold what your chambers lost. Dravik's gaze flicked toward her. Again, she speaks beyond her station. No, Selka said. I speak from the floor where the lost heat falls. The junior attendants did not move, but several lifted their eyes. Vaelor noticed. Dravik noticed too. His voice cooled. The lower baths are not a court. Selka's hand tightened around the wounded flame despite the burn. Then stop sentencing things here. Silence pressed low through the steam. Vaelor took one step nearer to the ember circle. The salamanders shrank back at first, not from his crown but from his heat. Their instinct wounded him before Selka's words could. She saw it cross his face, quick and contained. Good. Let him feel what his trust had taught them to fear. He stopped before the circle. Selka. Her name in his mouth did not soften her. I need to know whether the rite failed because the salamanders were carrying my flame, he said. No, she answered. Dravik moved at once. She cannot know that. Selka looked at Vaelor, not the surgeon. If the flame was stored before the report, then the rupture began before they were blamed. They did not cause the break. They caught pieces of it after something had already cut you. Vaelor's chest sigils flickered. For a breath, pain moved through him so sharply, his hand closed at his side. Dravik stepped closer. Or, she kept the creatures near the flame channels long enough for them to absorb power before the ritual, weakening the rite. Selka's eyes went cold. They absorbed dying sparks, not living flame. You hid them. I hid them from purge fires, not from you. Convenient distinction. Necessary one. Marrow made a tiny sound against her skirt. Selka lowered one hand enough to touch his back with 2 fingers. His glow was fading again. The testimony had cost him strength. It had cost all of them. They were not miracle creatures pouring endless proof into the room. They were small bodies that had already been drained too much. Vaelor saw hair touch. His voice dropped. They weaken when they speak. Yes. Why? Because no one listened while they were strong. The words landed between them. Not romantic. Not tender. Truer than either. A heavy step sounded from the stairs above. 2 royal flame guards entered the baths, followed by a senior bath clerk carrying a sealed iron roll. Dravik's expression shifted so quickly, most would have missed it. Selka did not. Vaelor turned. What is that? The clerk bowed low. Purge authorization, Majesty. The surgeon requested immediate sterilization of lower bath ember creatures and contaminated ash surfaces. Dravik said, Prudent procedure after rupture. Selka looked at the iron roll. Her stomach tightened. When was it signed? She asked. The clerk glanced at her as if the floor had spoken. Dravik's voice sliced through the steam. She has no standing to question royal sterilization. Vaelor did not look away from the clerk. Answer her. The clerk swallowed. Before the report was entered into the upper court archive, the baths went still. Dravik recovered with astonishing speed. Purge fires are standard sterilization. Selka rose slowly to her knees, still inside the living ember circle. The salamanders shifted with her, weak but gathered, their red backs barely glowing. Sterilization does not happen before diagnosis. Dravik's eyes hardened. There! The line had struck bone. Vaelor reached for the iron roll. The clerk hesitated only a moment before placing it in his hand. The king broke the seal. A thin strip of blackened parchment uncurled, reflecting gold from the flames still burning above Selka's injured palms. Vaelor read. The silence around him changed. Selka could not see the words from where she knelt, but she saw the muscles tighten along his jaw. She saw the folded report in Dravik's hand. She saw, at last, the beginning of a king measuring one document against another. Dravik spoke softly. Majesty, in emergency medicine, preventative sterilization may precede final report. Selka looked at him. Not unless the surgeon already knows what he wants dead. The salamanders stirred. All 17 opened their mouths, but no flame came at first. They were too weak. Marrow trembled violently in Selka's lap. Selka bent over him, shielding him with her body as if her small shadow could protect him from a room full of royal heat. "Enough," she whispered. "You do not have to." Marrow looked up at her. Then, with a frail hiss, he breathed one last thread of gold onto the ash. The other salamanders joined him, not with strength, but with witness. The gold threads braided together and burned across the floor between Vaelor's feet and Dravik's polished boots. Purge order issued before renewal rite. Dravik did not look at the gold letters. He looked at the flame guards. That was how Selka knew he was still dangerous. Not because the ash had named the purge order. Not because Dragon King Vaelor runes stood with the unrolled authorization in his hand and the first true doubt burning in his face. Dravik Keld was dangerous because he did not waste time grieving a lie when there were still small bodies left to destroy. "Seal the burial pit," Dravik said. The 2 flame guards hesitated. Vaelor's head turned slowly. "I did not give that order." Dravik bowed with perfect control. "No, Majesty, I did, as Ember Surgeon in an active contamination chamber." Selka felt the salamanders tighten around her knees. They did not flee. They were too weak for that. Their little red backs pulsed faintly, gold threads flickering under the skin after forcing one more sentence into the ash. "Purge order issued before renewal rite." The words were still bright enough to reflect in Vaelor's eyes. He looked from the ash to Dravik. Why was a purge order issued before the rite? Dravik did not flinch. Preventative sterilization. Selka's burned palm throbbed around the floating fragment of royal flame. Sterilization does not happen before diagnosis. "You are repeating yourself," Dravik said. "You are avoiding the answer." The nearest flame guard shifted his grip on his spear. Its tip glowed white-orange, meant for sealing contaminated chambers with cleansing fire. Selka knew those spears. She had scrubbed the ash from their heads after purge days. Nothing small survived them. Not beetles in pipe cracks. Not salamander eggs under warm stone. Not creatures with names. Vaelor's voice came lower. "No one seals the pit." The guards froze. Dravik turned toward the king. "Majesty, every moment those creatures remain alive, your flame remains unstable." "My flame was unstable before the rite," Vaelor said. The words cost him. Selka heard it. She did not soften. He had not paid that cost when Marrow was breathing in a trough. Dravik's mouth tightened. "A king's weakened flame draws scavenger species. They feed where royal heat falters. Their presence is symptom and threat." Selka looked down at Marrow. "He calls you symptom now." Marrow lifted his head weakly as if even insult had become heavy. Vaelor took one step closer to the ember circle. The salamanders pulled inward around Selka. Their bodies were tiny, but together they made a ring of red light between the Dragon King and the flame in her hands. Vaelor stopped. That, more than his command to the guards, struck the room. He stopped because they feared him. Selka saw the knowledge enter him, too late, but not useless. He looked at her. Can they survive if the flame remains inside them? No, Dravik said. Then extraction is necessary. Selka looked up sharply. Necessary for whom? For the king. For the creatures? Dravik's eyes cooled. Creatures do not outrank a crown. A small sound moved from one of the junior attendants. Selka did not look to see who made it. She kept her gaze on Dravik, because he had finally said the quiet part in a room with witnesses. Vaelor's jaw hardened. Answer her. Dravik bowed his head. If the salamanders carry royal flame, they must be opened before the fragments rot. There are humane methods. Selka's mouth went dry. Opened. Not treated. Not healed. Opened. She looked at the salamanders more carefully then, not as pets, not as a grieving caretaker protecting them by instinct, but as someone who had cleaned enough wounds to recognize the shape of a hidden blade. "Marrow," she whispered. The little salamander blinked. She turned him gently in her lap. There, beneath the ember gill, almost hidden by ash, was a pin-thin black mark. Not a burn from bath heat. Not a vent scrape. Too clean, too deliberate. Her breath stopped. She checked the next salamander nearest her knee. Then another. The same mark. All of them. Vaelor saw her face change. "What is it?" Selka did not answer him. She lifted Meryl carefully so the attendants could see. "Who made this cut?" Dravik said, "Lower bath creatures injure themselves constantly. This is not a crack burn." She held Meryl higher, though the movement made the creature shiver. "This is a needle mark under the gill." The bath attendants drew closer despite themselves. One whispered, "They all have it." Dravik's voice sharpened. "Do not touch contaminated animals." Selka looked at Vaelor. They were not only carrying flame, someone pierced them where flame breathes. The fragment in her palm flared. The salamanders answered with weak red light, not enough for words, not enough for a full testimony, just enough to make every black mark glow at once beneath their gills. 17 needle cuts. 17 small wounds no one had been meant to inspect before burial. Vaelor went still. Dravik stepped forward. "Majesty, she is manipulating injuries after death." "They are alive," Selka said. "Barely. A small thing alive is still alive." The words trembled through the lower ember baths. Vaelor looked from the glowing needle marks to the report in Dravik's hand. Were extraction instruments used before the rite? Dravik's silence was almost perfect. Almost. The gold flame in Selka's palm burned hotter, opening the line across her skin until blood welled red beneath it. Marrow stretched his tiny neck, mouth trembling. "No," Selka whispered. "Do not spend it." But he did. A thread of royal gold slipped from his mouth and touched the copper trough beside the burial pit. Heat spread across the metal, burning through the old ash stains until a hidden pattern appeared along the rim. Not words this time. Marks. 17 tiny notches, each one shaped like an Ember Surgeon's extraction needle. Then, beneath them, a line of molten gold finally formed. Gill extraction performed before rite failure. The copper trough remembered the needle before any person admitted it. 17 tiny notches glowed along the rim, each one shaped like an Ember Surgeon's extraction point. Each one answering the black marks beneath the salamander's gills. The molten line beneath them did not fade. Gill extraction performed before rite failure. Selka Morn held Marrow against her lap with one hand, and the wounded fragment of royal flame above the other. Heat cut deeper into her palm, but she did not close her fingers. If she trapped the flame, it would hurt less. If she loosened her care, it might break apart completely. A small thing in pain did not become safer because holding it burned. Dragon King Vaelor runes stared at the trough. No one spoke first. Not the attendants. Not the flame guards. Not Dravik Keld, who had finally learned the value of silence when silence might still resemble dignity. Vaelor turned to him. "Were extraction instruments used on the salamanders before the rite?" Dravik bowed his head. "Majesty, Lower bath creature sampling is standard before a renewal rite. Any ember residue near royal channels must be tested. Selka looked at the needle marks. Testing does not leave every gill pierced in the same place. Dravik's eyes moved to her. You would not know proper sampling depth. I know how they breathe. The sentence was quiet. It struck harder than accusation. Selka lifted Marrow just enough for the gold light to show the black mark under his gill. The little salamander sagged in her hand, exhausted by testimony. Around her knees, the ember circle had dimmed. Their bodies were still glowing, but faintly now, the way coals glowed when someone had taken too much heat and left only loyalty behind. Vaelor saw it. They are weakening. Yes, Selka said. Because they are holding my flame? Because they were cut open to take it. Dravik stepped in before the words could root. An emotional conclusion. She mistakes medical contact for cruelty because she is attached to vermin. The bath attendants flinched at vermin. Selka did not. She had heard worse said over smaller bodies. Vaelor's voice lowered. Do not call them that. Dravik went still. It was not an apology to Selka. It was not protection enough. But it was the first time Vaelor's command had moved toward the creatures instead of over them. Selka did not let it soften her. She turned to the nearest junior attendant. Bring the lower bath instrument tray. The boy froze. Dravik's head snapped toward him. No. Vaelor looked at the boy. Bring it. The attendant ran. Dravik's jaw tightened. Majesty, instruments used before a rite are sterilized and sealed under surgeon authority. A bath caretaker has no standing to inspect them. Selka looked at him. You ordered me to bury the evidence before the bodies cooled. Forgive me if I distrust your seals. The words hung in the red mist. Vaelor did not rebuke her. Dravik noticed. The junior attendant returned, carrying a narrow iron tray wrapped in black heat cloth. He set it on the stone floor outside the ember circle and stepped back quickly, as if the instruments might accuse him too. Selka did not reach for the tray. She looked at Vaelor. Open it. His eyes flicked to her burned palm, then to the salamanders. Then he crouched and pulled back the cloth himself. Inside lay 6 ember instruments, each polished clean, a bone scalpel, 2 ash hooks, a flame tube, a glass vial, and an extraction needle as thin as a thorn. 2 clean. Selka looked at the salamanders. Marrow. The little creature stirred weakly. You do not have to spend flame, she whispered. But Marrow crawled from her lap to the edge of the circle, one tiny step, then another. His missing toe dragged through ash, leaving an uneven star print behind him. Vaelor watched the movement as if each step cut him. Marrow reached the tray and pressed his wounded gill against the extraction needle. Nothing happened. Dravik exhaled through his nose. There. Enough theater. Then the other salamanders began crawling. Not fast. Not strong. One by one, they left Selka's knees and crossed the ash toward the tray. Each placed its gill against the same needle. Each black mark answered the metal with a faint gold spark. The needle darkened. A seam appeared along its hollow body. Selka's breath caught. It is not a sampling needle. Vaelor looked at her. What is it? A siphon needle. Dravik's voice sharpened. That is not a clinical distinction recognized by the upper archive. It is recognized by anything that survives the lower baths, Selka said. Sampling needles take residue. Siphon needles draw live heat through a breathing channel. Vaelor's face changed. Not grief. Not yet. Something colder. Why would anyone draw live heat from salamanders? Selka looked at the gold threads beneath their red backs. Because they were carrying yours. Dravik stepped forward. Majesty, this is speculation built from frightened creatures and a caretaker's fantasy. The siphon needle answered before Selka could. A thin line of royal gold ran through its hollow center, then spilled across the iron tray, not enough to restore a king, enough to remember whose fire had passed through it. Letters burned into the black heat cloth beneath the needle. Instrument register required. Vaelor stood. Bring the surgeon's register. Dravik's face went smooth. The register is kept in the upper infirmary. Bring it here. Majestu. Now. The flame guard nearest the stairs moved at once. Dravik did not stop him. That frightened Selka more than protest would have. A guilty man fought the door. A prepared man let someone open it. When the guard returned with a narrow ledger bound in ember leather, Vaelor took it himself. He broke the infirmary seal and laid the book open beside the tray. The siphon needle rolled without being touched. It struck one page. Gold fire spread from the point. A single entry burned through the ink. Extraction needle, registered to Dravik Keld. The register did not burn Dravik's hand. That was what made him recover. He looked at the gold letters seared through the infirmary page, then at the extraction needle lying beside the tray, as if both had become inconvenient instruments, not accusations. Extraction needle registered to Dravik Keld. A junior attendant made a small sound and covered it too late. Dragon King Vaelor did not look away from the page. His face had become harder than anger, the kind of stillness Selka had seen in cracked stone before heat split it wide. Dravik bowed his head. Of course it is registered to me. I am the Ember Surgeon assigned to the renewal rite. Every instrument used in royal preparation carries my authority. Selka held Marrow close as the little salamander sagged against her skirt. Authority is not innocence. Dravik's eyes cut to her. Nor is attachment evidence. Around Selka's knees, the red salamanders had dimmed further. Their ember backs no longer glowed steadily. The gold threads beneath their skin flickered in broken pulses, each one weaker than the last. They had given too much testimony already, and the room still stood around them asking for more. Selka felt the flame above her palm tremble. The thin red burn line across her skin had widened. Holding Vaelor's wounded fragment hurt more with every breath. She did not close her hand. Vaelor saw the blood gather at her palm. His voice lowered. Does it hurt? Selka looked up at him. Yes. A pause. He did not ask her to give it back. Good. The first useful mercy was restraint. He turned to Dravik. Who used the needle? Dravik folded both gloved hands before him. Surgeon staff. Possibly assistants. The register identifies ownership, not touch. Then bring the usage page. Dravik's face did not move. Selka heard the silence beneath his stillness. Vaelor did too. The Dragon King looked to the flame guard. Find it, Dravik said. Majesty, usage records may be incomplete after rite disruption. Selka's mouth tightened. Bodies are always complete enough when you want them buried. The attendants looked down. Dravik smiled faintly. You mistake grief for procedure. No, Selka said. I mistake procedure for the place you hide grief after you make it. The register page flickered once. Not from the salamanders. From the royal flame in Selka's injured palm. Vaelor's gaze followed the movement. What did it answer? Selka looked at the ledger more carefully. The gold letters had not spread, but the edge of the burned page curled upward, exposing another sheet beneath it, not a usage page. A narrow slip tucked between entries, sealed with pale surgeon's wax. Dravik stepped forward. Vaelor's voice cut across the baths. Stop. Dravik stopped. Selka reached for the slip. Her burned hand shook. Vaelor moved as if to help. She looked at him once. He stopped too. She took the slip herself. The wax was cold, but Marrow lifted his head weakly and breathed a tiny ember against it. The seal softened, not enough to melt cleanly. enough for Selka to open without tearing the paper. Inside was a measurement strip. 17 marks. Each mark was paired with a small number of ember grains and a note written in Dravik's precise hand. Vessel stable. Vessel weakening. Vessel near collapse. Selka's throat tightened. Vessels. Not marrow. Not redcap. Not little soot. Not the names she had whispered while lifting them from scalding pipes. Vessels. Vaelor read over her shoulder without touching her. His breath changed at the third line. Dravik spoke quickly. Clinical observation. Nothing more. Selka looked at the salamanders. You watched them weaken. Monitoring is not harm. You kept count. Any competent surgeon keeps count of how close they were to collapse. Dravik's eyes hardened. Of how royal flame behaved in unstable carriers. The word carriers struck the room. Vaelor looked at him. You knew they carried my flame. Dravik's answer came too late. I suspected contamination. Selka lifted the measurement strip higher. Before the report, Dravik said nothing. The register answered. A gold line ran from Selka's wounded palm to the strip. Not bright, not dramatic, only stubborn. It passed through each numbered mark and lit the dates one by one. The first date was 3 weeks before the renewal rite. The second was 2 weeks before. The third was 9 days before. The final mark was the morning before the rite failed. Vaelor went very still. Selka whispered, They were dying for weeks. Marrow pressed his head against her wrist. The other salamanders moved closer, dragging themselves through ash with tiny, weakening steps. They did not form new words. They had no strength for that. They only gathered around the strip as if each small body wanted the room to understand that measurement had been another kind of wound. Dravik recovered with a colder voice. If the caretaker had reported the creatures properly, intervention might have been cleaner. Selka looked at him. I reported their fevered glow to the bath office. Dravik's mouth thinned. You reported creature distress, not royal flame storage, because I did not know a surgeon had cut them open to find it. Vaelor's chest sigils flickered hard enough that one attendant stepped back. He did not explode. He did not apologize. He asked the question that mattered next. Where did the extracted flame go? Dravik's expression smoothed. Too smooth. The royal renewal basin received all approved preparations. Selka felt the flame in her palm shudder violently. The salamanders hissed as one. A small sound. A terrified sound. Not at Vaelor. At the words renewal basin. The register on the floor flipped several pages by itself, driven by the thin gold thread from Selka's palm. Pages fluttered past inventory, bath salts, fever oils, ember stabilizers, and ritual glass. Then one entry stopped beneath the needle. Gold fire burned across the line. Extracted flame transferred to renewal basin under surgeon seal. The upper renewal chamber answered before anyone reached it. A deep sound rolled down through the pipes above the lower ember baths. Not a roar, not a crack, but the slow groan of a basin remembering heat it should never have held. Steam trembled along the ceiling stones. The iron runoff pipes pulsed once, then glowed dull gold from within. Every red salamander shrank toward Selka, not toward Vaelor. Toward her. That hurt him more visibly than any accusation so far. Selka felt marrow press against her wrist, trembling so hard his small claws caught in her sleeve. The flame in her palm bent toward the pipes and then recoiled, as if it recognized the path and feared being pulled back through it. Vaelor Rune looked at the glowing entry in the register. Extracted flame transferred to renewal basin under surgeon's seal. Then he looked at Dravik Keld. Open the renewal basin. Dravik's face remained composed. Majesty, the upper chamber is unstable after the failed rite. Disturbing the basin could endanger your remaining flame. My remaining flame is in a bath girl's bleeding hand and 17 dying salamanders, Vaelor said. Open it. No apology. No plea. But the words finally placed the king inside the truth instead of above it. Selka did not soften. Dravik bowed. As you command. That obedience frightened her. He should have resisted harder if he had been cornered. A prepared man could afford to open one door because he had locked another behind it. The flame guards led them upward through the narrow service stair. Selka carried Marrow against her chest. The other salamanders followed in a weak red line, their feet leaving faint, star-shaped prints in the ash dust. 2 attendants tried to scoop them into copper bowls. Selka stopped them with one look. They walk. They can barely move, one attendant whispered. Then slow down. Vaelor heard. The procession slowed. Not for court rank. For salamander feet. The upper renewal chamber opened beneath a ceiling of black glass and bronze dragon ribs. At its center stood the royal renewal basin, a wide bowl of carved obsidian filled with dark, unmoving flame water. Ember sigils circled the rim, most were dim. One surgeon's seal still burned white at the north edge. Dravik's seal. Selka smelled it. Before she understood it. Not rot. Not blood. Old heat, forced to behave. The salamanders hissed softly as they reached the threshold. Vaelor stopped beside the basin. The dim sigils along his chest answered the flame water with a weak flicker, then failed again. His jaw tightened, but he did not reach for the basin. He looked at Selka instead. What do they sense? Selka kept Marrow close. Pain, they remember. Dravik spoke smoothly. Animal distress proves nothing. The basin contains royal flame residue after a rupture. Naturally, they react. Selka looked at him. Residual contamination again? If the term is accurate, yes. The register in Vaelor's hand glowed faintly. Not enough to write? The salamanders were too weak. Selka lowered Marrow to the floor. No, do not spin more. Marrow looked up at her with black bead eyes, then crawled toward the basin anyway. Marrow, she whispered. He reached the obsidian rim and placed his wounded gill against the stone. The white surgeon's seal flickered. A gold thread appeared under his skin and leapt to the basin. The flame water moved. Not like water, like a mouth opening under ash. Inside it, Selka saw tiny gold sparks trapped beneath a dark surface, circling slowly, unable to rise. Dozens of them, more than the salamanders had carried, more than the fragments now gathered around her feet. Vaelor's breath caught. Selka felt the answer before anyone said it. Dravik had not merely taken flame from the salamanders. He had fed the basin with it. Vaelor's voice dropped. Why is my flame trapped under the seal? Dravik answered too quickly. To stabilize the rite. Selka looked at him. Stabilize? Extracted fragments can be returned through controlled basin immersion. It is delicate but necessary when royal fire is dispersed. You did not return them, she said. You drowned them. The flame water shuddered. The trapped sparks struck the surface from underneath, one after another, tiny gold lives beating against black glass. Vaelor stepped closer. Selka's voice snapped. Do not touch it. He stopped. Everyone in the chamber heard that. A bath caretaker ordering the Dragon King away from his own renewal basin. No one corrected her. Not after the salamanders recoiled harder at his movement. If you reach into that seal, Selka said, it will pull the fragment from my hand, the fragments from them, and whatever is left inside you. It wants all the pieces in one place. Dravik's eyes narrowed. She invents danger to preserve control. Selka lifted her bleeding palm. The small gold coal shook above it, drawn toward the basin and resisting at once. I am not preserving control, she said. I am keeping your mistake from finishing what his procedure began. Vaelor looked at Dravik. Was the basin meant to gather all dispersed flame? Dravik said nothing for half a breath too long. The basin answered. A ring of gold sparks rose beneath the dark surface, forming a circle that matched the salamanders gathered at Selka's feet. Then, across the inside wall of the obsidian bowl, letters burned from within the flame water. Basin seal designed to reclaim all carriers. The chamber went cold despite the heat. Selka understood first. All carriers, not just loose flame, the salamanders. Vaelor himself. Dravik had built a seal that did not heal royal flame. It harvested whatever still carried it. Vaelor looked at the words, then at the creatures trembling behind Selka's skirts. His voice came low and dangerous. Carriers includes living bodies. Dravik's face smoothed into surgeon calm. In royal medicine, Majesty, the crown flame outranks the vessel. Selka bent and gathered marrow back into her palm. No, she said. The word was small. It still reached every corner of the chamber. Vaelor turned toward her. Selka held his wounded flame, her blood and the trembling salamander together in her hands. If you want your flame back, she said, you will not ask me over their bodies. The basin seal flared white, and every salamander in the room began to glow as if the bowl had started pulling them apart. The first salamander lifted from the floor without moving its feet. It rose only a finger's width above the black stone, tiny claws scraping at the air, ember gills flaring as the white seal around the renewal basin pulled at the gold thread beneath its skin. The creature made no scream. That made it worse. It only opened its mouth and let out a thin breath of smoke, too weak to become flame. Selka caught it before the seal could lift it higher. The pull struck her palm at once. Pain tore through the red line already burned across her hand, and the royal flame hovering above her skin bent violently toward the basin. Marrow clung to her sleeve, trembling. Around her, the other salamanders tried to crawl inward, toward the only body in the chamber that had ever placed herself between them and fire. The basin brightened. Basin seal designed to reclaim all carriers. The words burned inside the obsidian bowl, while the trapped sparks beneath the flame water struck the dark surface again and again. Dravik Keld stepped closer. Do not interfere with royal recovery. Selka pressed the lifted salamander against her chest. You mean harvesting? I mean restoring the king. Vaelor Rune stood on the opposite side of the basin, his face sharpened by fever and fury. The seal pulled at him too. Selka saw it now. His chest sigils flared toward the bowl, then recoiled, then flared again. The basin wanted the broken parts of his flame wherever they lived. In the salamanders, in him, Dravik turned to the king. Majesty, if the seal completes, the fragments return to your core. The carriers will not survive intact, but your flame may stabilize. The chamber went utterly still. Carriers, not creatures, not Selka, not living bodies with fear and breath. Vaelor's eyes darkened. You knew that. Dravik's expression remained calm. I knew the risk. Selka laughed once, but it broke before it became sound. Risk is what powerful men call death when they do not have to lie down for it. The salamander against her chest pulsed faintly. The basin pulled harder. 2 more salamanders lifted from the floor. Selka reached for them, but she could not hold all of them. Her burned hand shook. The flame above her palm dragged toward the bowl so fiercely she nearly lost her balance. Vaelor moved, not toward the basin, toward the salamanders. He knelt and caught one small red body in both hands before it could be pulled across the stone. Every flame in the chamber bent toward him. The creature writhed in his grasp, terrified, its gills flaring against his royal heat. Vaelor froze. Selka saw the pain of it pass through him. Not the burn. The fear. This was what his trust had made of him to them. Not king, not protector, but another large hand arriving too late. Hold him lower, Selka said. Vaelor obeyed. Do not cover the gills. He shifted his fingers at once. The salamander stopped thrashing, though it still trembled. Dravik's eyes narrowed. Majesty, do not lower yourself into the carrier field. It confuses the seal. Good, Vaelor said. The word was quiet. Dangerous. Not. Apology. Action. The basin seal flashed white in answer, angrier now. More salamanders lifted. Attendants gasped and backed away. One junior attendant, the boy who had brought the instrument tray, looked at Selka as if asking permission to be brave. Warm ash, Selka said. From the west basin, make a ring. He ran. 2 others followed him. Dravik snapped, No one moves under contamination pull. Vaelor did not look away from the salamander in his hands. They move. The attendants returned with bowls of warm ash and poured them around Selka by instinct, by memory, by everything the lower baths had taught them that the upper court had never written down. Selka guided them with her bleeding hand. Not too close. Leave breath space. The ash ring glowed dull red. The salamanders dropped back to the floor one by one, weak but no longer floating. They crawled into the warmth, pressing their tiny bodies against the ash, and the pull from the basin shuddered as if it had met something older than surgeon wax. Dravik's face changed. Selka saw it. What is this? Vaelor asked. Selka's voice was breathless. Lower bath ember ring. We use it when vents cough old flame. It teaches small heat where to rest until it can choose a direction. Dravik said sharply, Folk handling, not medicine. No, Selka said. Care. The flame in her palm steadied. Not healed. Steadied. The basin seal flickered. Inside the bowl, a new line began to form, slow and reluctant, as if the seal hated admitting a law it had tried to ignore. Carriers resisting reclaim through care bond. Dravik stepped forward. Majesty, that confirms improper attachment. The caretaker has bonded the carriers against royal recovery. Selka looked at him. They are resisting death. They are resisting return. They are alive. The room heard it. Vaelor heard it most. He looked down at the salamander in his hands, now breathing shallowly against his fingers. His voice came low. What stops the seal without killing them? Selka looked at him then. This was the question she had been waiting for. Not how to take his flame back, not how to prove Dravik wrong, how to keep the small bodies alive. You cannot ask for the flame first, she said. His jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. If they remain ritual waste, the seal can reclaim them. If they are named carriers under royal medicine, Dravik can cut them open. If they are named sacred flame keepers, no surgeon may harvest them without witness law. Dravik went still. Vaelor saw that too. Selka held the wounded flame higher, though it burned her palm bright red. You want your flame back, she said. I know, but if you ask me for it before you protect them, you are asking over their bodies. The basin seal pulsed violently. Gold sparks struck the flame water from beneath. Dravik spoke through his teeth. Majesty, do not let a lower bath girl bargain with your life. Selka did not look at him. She looked only at Vaelor. Are you asking for yourself, she said, or for the creatures you let die? The question burned hotter than the flame. Vaelor's face did not soften. It broke in a quieter place. Before he could answer, the basin seal flared again, and a final line appeared inside the obsidian bowl. Royal law required to override surgeon reclamation. The basin had asked for law because medicine had become a knife. Royal law required to override surgeon reclamation. The words burned inside the obsidian bowl while the white seal pulled at every fragment of royal flame in the chamber. Selka Morn knelt inside the warm ash ring, one hand bleeding beneath Vaelor's wounded fire, the other cupped around Merrow's small, trembling body. Around her, the red salamanders pressed close to the ash, weak, but no longer floating, their ember gills opening and closing with shallow breaths. Dragon King Vaelor stood at the edge of the ring with a salamander in his hands. He held it the way Selka had told him, low, gills uncovered, careful enough that the creature had stopped fighting, though it still trembled against his fingers. Dravik Keld looked at the line inside the basin and saw danger in it that had nothing to do with flame. Law could survive where a report might not. Majesty, he said, royal law cannot be rewritten in a contaminated chamber under emotional coercion. Selka did not look at him. It can be rewritten in the same chamber where you meant to kill them. Dravik's mouth tightened. I meant to restore the king. No, Selka said. You meant to make restoration require their deaths. Vaelor's eyes remained on the salamander in his hands. What law? Dravik stepped forward. Majesty, do not entertain. Vaelor lifted his gaze. Dravik stopped, not because the king had shouted, because he had not. What law? Vaelor repeated. Selka swallowed against the heat climbing through her palm. The fragment above her skin flickered toward the basin, then bent back toward Merrow, as if it too was waiting to learn what kind of hands the room would become. Sacred flame, keep her protection, she said. Old law, almost never used. Dravik's face went still. Vaelor saw it. Selka continued. It names a living creature as guardian of unstable royal flame. Not vessel, not residue, not ritual waste. Keeper. Once named, no surgeon can cut, drain, burn, purge, or reclaim from it without open witness and the creature's survival placed before recovery. A junior attendant whispered, That law exists? Solene would have answered if she belonged in this story. Here, it was the oldest bath attendant, gray-haired Nira, who lifted her head from near the west basin. It exists, Nira said softly. For ember moths in the old queen's plague, for ash doves after the first crown fire. I have never heard it used for salamanders. Dravik's voice sharpened. Because salamanders are not sacred. Selka looked down at Merrow. His tiny missing toe rested against her burned wrist. They were not sacred when they cleaned your waist, she said. They became sacred when your knife needed them dead. The words struck the chamber. Vaelor looked toward the obsidian basin. His chest sigils flickered weakly, answering the flame trapped beneath Dravik's seal. Every second he waited cost him. Selka saw it in the tightness around his mouth, in the fever beneath his skin, in the way his fingers trembled once before he steadied them around the salamander he held. Dravik saw it too. He is dying, the surgeon said. Slowly, if you prefer the comfort of a gentler word. The longer the flame remains dispersed, the greater the damage to his core. Selka's heart clenched. She hated him for saying it. She hated more that it was partly true. Vaelor looked at her. If I name them flame keepers, can my flame return? Selka held his chaza. This was the place where a kinder woman might have softened. She did not. Maybe, she said, if they live long enough to release what they can, if the fragments want to return, if your body can receive them without the basin dragging all of it through Dravik's seal. His jaw tightened. And if they do not, then you do not get to buy certainty with their bodies. The chamber went silent. Dravik breathed out in controlled disbelief. Majesty, she is admitting she may let you die for vermin. The salamander in Vaelor's hands gave one weak hiss. Vaelor looked down at it, then at Selka, then at the basin. No, he said. She is admitting the law I should have asked for before asking for my flame. It was not an apology. Selka was glad. An apology would have wanted somewhere to land. There was no safe place yet. Vaelor turned to the flame guards. Witness. Both guards lowered their spears. The attendants drew closer, trembling. Dravik moved once more. Majesty, under emergency royal medicine, surgeon reclamation supersedes caretaker objection. Vaelor's eyes cut to him. Not after this moment. He knelt at the edge of the ash ring. The salamanders recoiled. He did not move closer. That restraint mattered more than kneeling. I, Vaelor Rune, Dragon King of the lower and upper flame, name the red salamanders of the lower ember bath's sacred flame, keepers under royal law. The basin seal flared white. Dravik's hands tightened. Vaelor continued, voice rougher now, heat failing at the edges. No surgeon, guard, court, or crown may purge, open, drain, or reclaim them as ritual fuel. Their survival stands before my recovery. Their testimony stands before Dravik Keld's report. The ash ring ignited in red gold light. One by one, the salamanders lifted their heads. Not strong, not healed, named. The white seal around the renewal basin cracked. Dravik's face changed. For the first time, it was not calculation. It was fear. Selka saw it and understood that the law had not only protected the salamanders, it had touched something hidden inside the seal. The flame in her palm pulled downward, not toward the basin now, but toward Dravik's right glove. Marrow hissed. Vaelor saw the movement. Slowly, the Dragon King looked at Dravik's hand. Remove the glove, he said. Dravik did not move. The basin answered instead. Beneath the cracked white seal, trapped royal sparks rose and arranged themselves against the obsidian wall. Letters burned from inside the flame water. Reclaimed flame routed to surgeon's hand. Dravik Keld did not remove his glove. That was answer enough. The renewal chamber held still around him. Black glass ceiling, bronze dragon ribs, cracked obsidian basin, warm ash ring glowing around Selka Morn and the trembling red salamanders. Inside the basin, trapped royal sparks pressed against the flame water wall, shaping the sentence no report could soften. Reclaimed flame routed to surgeon's hand. Vaelor Rune's voice came low. Remove it. Dravik's expression remained smooth, but his right hand had curled slightly, hiding itself beneath the dark sleeve of his surgeon's coat. Majesty, Ember, surgical seals are delicate. Mishandling, one could scatter the remaining fragments. Selka looked at Marrow, then at the salamanders gathered around her knees. Their bodies had begun to brighten under the protection of royal law, but they were still exhausted. Named did not mean healed. Sacred did not mean safe from pain already done. Then let the keepers decide, she said. Dravik's eyes flashed. Creatures do not decide royal medicine. They decided not to die when you ordered them buried. The flame in Selka's burned palm lifted at her words. It did not fly to Vaelor. It bent toward Dravik's glove and trembled with anger so small it almost looked like fear. Vaelor took one step toward the surgeon. Dravik moved faster than dignity should have allowed. He pressed his gloved hand against the basin seal. White fire erupted. The salamanders cried out, tiny mouths opening in soundless pain as the seal tried to pull every gold thread back through the chamber. Selka bent over them, her body becoming a wall of cloth, blood, and stubborn breath. Vaelor caught the edge of the basin with both hands and forced his own dragon heat down, not into the seal but against it. For once, he did not reach to take. He reached to hold back the taking. Selka, he said through clenched teeth. What stops it? She looked at the ash ring. The glove. It is the false mouth. Vaelor turned. Dravik had almost reached the stair. Marrow moved before anyone else. The tiny salamander with the missing toe crawled out from beneath Selka's sleeve, weak and shaking, and placed himself in Dravik's path. One small body against an Ember Surgeon. Dravik looked down. Move. Marrow opened his mouth. New flame came. He had spent too much. Selka's heart clenched. Marrow. The other salamanders moved. One by one, they left the warm ash ring and crawled beside him. Red backs, black bead eyes, tiny feet leaving star-shaped prints in ash dust. They formed no crown, no throne sign, no miracle meant to flatter a court. They formed a barrier. Small lives saying no. Dravik lifted his boot. Vaelor's hand closed around his wrist before the step fell. The chamber cracked with heat. Do not, the Dragon King said. Dravik's composure finally broke. They are vessels. They are protected by law. They are animals. They are witnesses. Vaelor tore the glove from Dravik's hand. The surgeon screamed, not because of torn cloth, because beneath the glove his palm was carved with a black ember graft, thin channels cut under the skin, each one packed with stolen gold flame. Vaelor's flame, not resting, not healing, routed, stored in a surgeon's hand like contraband power. The basin went dark for half a breath, then every trapped spark inside it struck the obsidian wall at once. Selka understood the shape of it. Dravik had not stolen enough flame to become Dragon King. He had stolen enough to decide whether the Dragon King ever became whole again. Enough to keep Vaelor sick. Enough to make every future renewal pass through his hand. Vaelor looked at the graft, then at Dravik. What were you buying? Dravik's mouth twisted around pain. Stability. No. Control then, Dravik snapped. A king with failing flame listens to the man who can steady it. A court fears illness more than cruelty. I gave them a surgeon to trust. Selka's voice was quiet. And bodies to blame. Dravik looked at her with hatred stripped bare. You should have buried them, the salamanders hissed. This time, the sound filled the chamber. The graft in Dravik's palm split open. Gold flames spilled from the black channels, not toward the basin, not toward Dravik, but toward the salamanders first. The sparks touched their backs one by one, recognizing the small keepers who had carried pain without being asked whether they could bear it. Marrow brightened. Redcap brightened. Little Soot brightened. All 17 glowed, not strong yet, but alive in a way the chamber could no longer call waste. Only then did the royal flame rise from them in thin gold threads. Vaelor stood very still. He did not reach. Selka looked at him. Do not command them. I will not. Do not call them vessels. I will not. And do not ask me to return what they still need to survive. Vaelor's throat moved. I am not asking for myself. She held his gaze. This time, she believed the beginning of the answer. Not all of it. Not yet. Vaelor lowered himself to one knee outside the ash ring. The salamanders watched him, their small bodies still trembling. If any fragment can return without killing them, he said, I receive it under their law. If not, it remains with its keeper. The flame waited. Then Marrow crawled forward. He stopped at Selka's burned hand first, pressing his head briefly against her palm, as if returning thanks in the only language he had. Then he breathed. One gold thread rose from his mouth and crossed the space to Vaelor's chest sigils. Another salamander followed, then another. Not all the flame, not every fragment. Only what could leave without taking their lives with it. Vaelor bowed his head as the threads entered him. The chamber filled with bronze-gold light. His sigils reignited slowly, unevenly, like a wounded hearth learning warmth again. He gasped once, but did not move toward the remaining fragments. He let them stay where they lived. The basin's seal shattered. Dravik collapsed to his knees as the stolen graft went black. The flame guards seized him, and this time no report stood between his hand and the truth. By dawn, the lower ember baths were no longer a place where unwanted creatures disappeared into purge ash. Vaelor opened the upper court himself and read the law aloud. The red salamanders were sacred flame, keepers of the royal fire, protected from purge, extraction, cutting, burning, or medical claim without open witness and survival bond. Dravik Keld's reports were unsealed. His instruments were named. His surgeon's hand was bound in cold iron for tribunal. Selka stood below the throne steps with marrow curled against her collarbone. Not beside Vaelor. Not yet. The court looked at her differently now, and she hated how late respect could arrive. Vaelor descended the steps without crown or guard. He stopped several paces away, far enough that the salamanders did not shrink. "I will not ask forgiveness today," he said. "Good," Selka answered. Pain crossed his face, but he accepted it. "What do they need first?" She looked at him then, not softly, honestly. Warm ash, clean vents, no purge fires, names written in the royal register. "All of it," he said. "And someone important enough to kneel when checking the small places." Vaelor lowered himself to one knee before the smallest ember vent in the court floor. The noble stared. Selka did not smile, but Marrow lifted his head and blinked. Weeks later, when the first restored royal flame warmed the palace without burning it, the court called the red salamanders sacred. Selka still called them by name. And when Vaelor came to the lower ember baths, he did not ask first for flame. He asked where to place the ash bowl. That was where their story began again. Not with a crown, not with a chosen queen, but with a Dragon King learning to hold small lives carefully enough that Selka Morn could bear to let him near the fire.